Materials are all available on the district's website at acwd.org. You may reference the instructions at the top of the agenda for how to participate using the controls in the Zoom app or your dial pad if participating by telephone audio. This board meeting is being recorded and will be made available to the public for future viewing. And again, thank you all for attending, and President Weed, that completes my housekeeping remarks.
All right, thank you. If you could please join us for the salute to the flag. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic which stands one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We have public comments. Is there anyone who wishes to address the board on an item which is not on the agenda this evening? I see none, so we will now close the public comment section. On the consent calendar, is there a request to add items to the consent calendar? And item 5.4, we have a request from staff not be added to the consent calendar.
I'll make the motion to add items 5.1, 5.2, and 5.3 to the consent calendar.
I'll second. And motion and seconded. A roll call, please.
Director Sethy,
Aye.
Akbari,
Aye.
Gunther,
Aye.
Huang, and Weed.
Aye. Do we have a motion to approve this consent calendar as amended?
I'll make the motion.
Second. Moved and seconded. Roll
Sure.
call, please.
Director Sethy,
Aye.
Akbari,
Aye.
Gunther,
Aye.
Huang, and Weed.
Aye. Let's move to item 5.4, which is an authorization of amendment to agreement for the SCADA and Information Technology Services.
That's right. Thank you, President Weed. Staff would like to address this item separately. We'd like to make a clarification and a correction in the motion that staff is recommending. So I'll turn it over to Mr. Ahrens, our Director of Operations and Maintenance.
Thank you, Mr. Stevenson. President Weed, members of the board, I'll provide a quick summary on this item. The district relies on agreements with technology service providers for technical expertise and support in the areas of Microsoft, Citrix, virtualization, networking, and cybersecurity to support the SCADA and IT search systems. In March of 2021, the board authorized agreements with 2 providers after a competitive selection process. Since then, the agreement with one of the providers was terminated. Staff now recommends amending the agreement with ZAG Technical Services, the remaining provider, for additional funding over the remaining life of the agreement. Authorization of this agreement provides staff the opportunity and continue the ability to access services necessary for maintenance and development of cybersecurity, networking, and technology to support SCADA and IT systems, but does not obligate the district to spend the full authorized amount. This item was reviewed with the Operations Water Quality Committee on August 2nd, 2022. There's adequate funding in the current budget, and future funds will be included in future budgets for this expenditure. Board approval of this amendment will assist the district in achieving strategic plan goal 1.1, efficiently manage and maintain our infrastructure to ensure reliability, and goal 1.3, continuously improve emergency preparedness and response capabilities. Recommendation: by motion, authorize the general manager to execute an amendment to the agreement with ZAG Technical Services for SCADA and Information Technology Services, an amount not to exceed $130,000 for the 2-year base term of the agreement, an amount of, this is where the correction is, staff is recommending not $150,000 but $140,000 for the 3-year optional 1-year extensions, for a total not to exceed amount of $520,000. So originally, just to clarify, in 2021, the board authorized a 5-year agreement for $100,000 the first year and $150,000 over the following 3 years, for a total of $250,000. This amendment, we're asking to add $130,000 to the first 2-year base term, which actually began in 2021, and then an additional amount of $140,000, which will add on to the remaining 3-year, 1-year extensions. So it's a little confusing. So the total amount of this agreement over the total 5-year life of the agreement, including this amendment and the original authorization, will be $520,000. So with that, I'll answer any questions you have.
And do we have any questions of the board?
None from me.
Right.
This was reviewed in our operations committee. So
The question I have on overall communications. Communications are rapidly evolving technology. And the city of Fremont recently adopted a citywide 5G city-controlled communication system. Do we occasionally evaluate that to see if whether we should maintain an independent system, or might we piggyback on another municipal system if it proves to be reliable?
I do know we have a separate, obviously, radio system and radio frequency that we can use. I'm not sure if this Fremont system is for their day-to-day use or for emergency.
Well, it'll be for total community infrastructure.
Right.
And it strikes me that if we want to look at an alternative backup, even if you look at it from a backup, that 5G is so fast that there may be some value to have a reliability portion by being able to have a backup to our own systems. Eventually, we may determine that it's easier just to rely on the
I think along with,
municipal infrastructure.
I think along with our IT staff, we can look into that as a potential option in the future.
Yeah, and this item relates to SCADA communications and the SCADA system, and our SCADA system uses fiber and microwave redundant lines, and then also some copper too. So, so we do have redundant communication systems.
And this might be a third redundancy.
President Weed, coming out of the wireless industry, I would seriously advise against doing these things on the 5G system on SCADA. We have secure encrypted microwave frequencies that we operate in. And we need to separate that out from all the other functions in the water district to keep it secure. That's what I would have to offer as an opinion.
Okay. And I suggested merely as a alternative backup if we needed to have a fail safe.
Well, you can operate backup frequencies in the licensed frequencies too.
Okay. Well, microwave requires line of sight and the alignment of your receivers. So those are the type of issues that could come into play. Oh, all right, thank you. As long as you keep throwing it out as a thought as we go through the process.
Okay.
All right, thank you. If there's no other comment or question, can we have a roll
Well,
call?
it's
We
important
have a
for
motion.
our customers to understand now our AMI system is going over a 5G cellular system, which is also encrypted and secure.
Exactly. So this is will be a 5G city controlled system. So that would be there was a proposal that we develop our own 5G system, and we did not pursue that. Similar to what Long Beach had done. Okay. Let me then see, do we have a motion then for approval of the item?
I move for approval. The
Second.
staff recommendation.
Second. Moved and seconded. If there's no further comment. Roll call, please.
Director Sethy,
Aye.
Akbari,
Aye.
Gunther,
All right.
Huang. Aye. And Weed.
Aye. Item 5.5 is a public hearing to receive comments on the draft Alameda County Water District report on water quality relative to the public health goals of 2019 to 2021. And as a public hearing, it warrants a script. So I will read the script. On behalf of the Board of Directors, I'd like to welcome the public and your participation in this evening's public hearing. The purpose of the public hearing is to receive and hear comments on the Alameda County Water District report on water quality relative to public health goals 2019 through 2021. Thank you for attending, in this case virtually. Oh, actually, we have two. The process. I will open public hearing and ACW staff will make a brief presentation. The presentation materials can be viewed online through the Zoom app or can be addressed on the district's website with the agenda and materials for this meeting at acwd.org. Upon conclusion of the presentation, the board and ACWD staff will receive public comments. The board and staff will receive all comments without responding. Upon conclusion of the public comment, the board may request input from staff and will respond to questions, comments from the public, and will then close the public hearing. Time limit for each person will be 5 minutes for their comments. Speaker requests. Anyone who would like to make public comments can do so by filling out a speaker card in the boardroom or by raising your hand in the Zoom app. Submitting your comments or questions in the chat feature in Zoom or by speaking up verbally when invited to do so. 2, if you are participating online, please raise your hand in the Zoom app. For those participating on Zoom phone, Zoom allows you to use your dial pad with *9 to raise and lower your hand. The district secretary will then unmute remote meeting participants when making public comments. Please be sure to unmute your own phone line or computer microphone so that you may be heard. Zoom allows you to use your dial pad *6 to mute, unmute your phone. For those participating online that may not have a microphone on their computer, please dial in by phone and on the number given on the agenda. You are participating online and we are unable to hear you during the public comments portion of the hearing. Please use the chat box feature of the Zoom interface to get attention of the district secretary. Please state your name and service address when making a verbal comment. Providing this information is voluntary. Public hearing is now open. Let me now open the public hearing. So I see no hands raised from the online participants. Oh, please. Have our general manager make the initial comments.
Thank you, President Weed. As required by California Health and Safety Code Section 116470, a draft report titled Alameda County Water District Report on Water Quality Relative to Public Health Goals 2019 through 2021 has been prepared by the district. The purpose of the Public Health Goal Report is to inform consumers of constituents in their drinking water that may either exceed a state public health goal or a federal maximum contaminant level goal during the calendar years 2019, 2020, and 2021. The Public Health Goal Report is intended to provide the public with water quality information beyond what is included in the annual Consumer Confidence Report. Statute requires the board to hold a public hearing and to accept and respond to public comments to the Public Health Goal Report. Any public comments received during the public hearings will be responded to in the final report. Notice of the public hearing was placed in the Argus on July 2022, July 22, and July 29, the Tri-City Voice on July 19 and July 26, and on the district's website. The Public Health Goal Report was reviewed with the Operations and Water Quality Board Committee on June 7, 2022. I'll now turn the item over to the district's Director of Operations and Maintenance, Kurt Arenz, who will lead the board through a summary of the report.
Thank you, Mr. Stevenson. Now I'd like to introduce Ranga Sampath, environmental engineer, who will provide a brief presentation outlining the content of the report.
Thank you, Mr. Ahrens. Good evening, members of the board and district staff. My name is Ranga Sampath. I'm an environmental engineer in the water production division here at the district. And tonight I will present the findings and the report on the draft public health goals. As Mr. Stevenson
I
mentioned.
think you need to speak up to the microphone, please.
Okay, sorry.
Let me sit, is it within our protocols to allow the person to speak without a mask?
To follow the rules entirely, he should continue to wear a mask. Yeah, but he can definitely get down to the microphone, not a problem.
Okay, thank you.
Is that loud enough? Sorry.
That's much better.
As Mr. Stevenson had mentioned, the public health goals report is above and beyond the consumer confidence report that we put out every year. The report regulations governing this report, the California Health and Safety Code, section 116470B, utilities that have greater than 10,000 service connections in California and detected any water quality measurement above the PHGs or MCLGs, maximum contaminant level goals, anytime in the past 3 years. So these reports are published every 3 years. And the regulations, according to Health and Safety Code, mandate that we prepare a brief written report. We posted it, the draft report on our website on July 1st of this year. The public hearing is being held tonight. And once, if the report is adopted, then we notify the Division of Drinking Water that the meeting was held and the report is available. And if any public comments were received, those will be addressed. We have had these reports previous years, as you can see, since 2001, once every 3 years. Some terminology, public health goals. I want to make a note that these are not enforceable. These are established by the Office of Environmental Health, Human Health and Hazard Assessment, OEHA. And essentially what they are looking at is potential health risks to be no more than one additional cancer case in 1 million people. So that's a very conservative approach. And these are based solely on public health risk, regardless of treatment feasibility or cost. Whereas an MCL looks at all the factors, considers all the factors in the establishment of an MCL. On the federal EPA side, the maximum contaminant level goals, these are again not enforceable and established by the US EPA. The MCLG is set at the level at which the contaminant in drinking water below which there is no known or expected risk to health. And these are the federal equivalent of the PHGs, which are set by the state OEHA. Further in the terminology, we are looking at maximum contaminant levels, which is the highest level of contaminant that's allowed in drinking water. And these are, as we all know, these are enforceable standards. And MCLs are set as close to MCLGs as feasible, but you also have to consider the best demonstrated available technology, the cost and the feasibility of implementation and demonstrated technologies that are out there. There is a new term, action levels. Essentially, it's more like a statistical indicator, but the 90th percentile value is something we look at, particularly for lead. And that's the concentration that's exceeded by 10% of the samples. So if you have a sample set, 10% of your samples are above, 90% is below. So that's an action level. And the action level essentially triggers any treatment or other requirements that a water system must follow. So that's an action level. So these are all the various terminology that are used in the PHG report. The content of the report is triennial. Like I mentioned, these are in addition to the consumer confidence reports that are published by the district. Identifies constituents that exceed the PHGs and the MCLG or the MCLGs in the previous 3 years. So in this case, it's 2019, 20, and 21. And like I said, the PHGs are set by the OEHA. So essentially, it's going to be looked at the sampling data over the past 3 years for these constituents that have a PHGs. The report should document the health effects, health risks associated with those constituents, and also go into what are the best available technologies and potential cost estimates to address any elevated levels. So that's primarily the contents of the report. Of all the, there are over 100 chemicals which have PHGs or MCLGs. And what is notable is only 2 were exceeded. lead and bromate, and I'll explain the levels we detected and what are some of the things we've been doing. The main thing to note here is we do not have any lead service lines. So primarily the lead is what you have from customers' plumbing and anything associated with that, because we have homes built over several decades. And as we all know, various materials that have the potential for lead getting into the water. So that's the lead detection part. Bromate primarily is a product of ozonation, which we use at our surface water treatment plant 2. But we've had some good strategies in terms of operations and have been able to also control bromate. So whenever we have raw water or the delta water having bromide levels, and then the ozonation, which is disinfectant, also controls taste and odor. But the problem is you could have bromate being generated as a byproduct. And that's something we also control via process. But those are the only two constituents that we have in the past 3 years have exceeded the PHGs. As you can see, the detections for lead, like I mentioned, it is the 90th percentile, 5.4 parts per billion. And for bromate, we do what we call a running annual averages. Basically, it's an average. We collect weekly data, and then it's aggregated into monthly, and then the quarterly averages presented over what we call a running annual average. The idea is to have a continuous time series and look at the same kind of trending data there. So we've had detections of that anywhere between non-detect and 2.2 parts per billion.
I would like to ask a quick question, which is for the benefit of the public. I believe I already know the answer, but ozonation kills bacteria and viruses that are in the water, and we are using that at PT2. How does that apply to PFAS and other forms of PFAS?
Quite honestly, we don't know. Mr. Vikram, would you like to add it?
Ozone is not one of the best available technologies for PFAS removal.
I don't think the public can hear you.
Excuse me. Ozone is not identified as one of the best available technologies for PFAS removal. Those 3 technologies would be reverse osmosis, granular activated carbon, and ion exchange.
Okay, that's what I was expecting to hear, but I wanted to make it clear for the public. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Vikram. So ozonation at TP2 is primarily for to address any microbial or bacteria and viruses in surface water treatment plant. It's more of a disinfecting technology rather than any contaminant removal. But then there is also taste and odor is addressed through that ozonation of surface water at TP2. Thank you.
That's a quick follow-up question.
Yes.
PFAS are not part of the 2019, 2021 criteria that we're addressing tonight. Is that correct?
Yes. They are not on this yet. Lead, I'll talk about lead and all the work we have been doing with regards to lead service line inventories, but the takeaway is lead was not detected in the water supply supplied by the district. And like I mentioned before, lead is introduced primarily through internal corrosion of any household water plumbing. Pass the meter, pass the service line, and then you have from the customer's internal plumbing. But we all know lead affects the sensitive population of children with neurological effects, hypertensive effects on adults. So lead has been known for a long time to be an issue. And the public health goal for lead is set at 0.2 parts per billion, so fairly low. This kind of provides a summary of our lead monitoring. So in 2021, so what we do is under the lead and copper rule monitoring, we do every 3 years, we do a monitoring of basically lead sampling. We draw up a representative population from the customer base in terms of homes, and we collect lead samples for lead analysis. And what you see here is the 90th percentile value from the data set is 5.4 parts per billion. As you can see, the action level is fairly high. It's 15 parts per billion. So we are well below the action levels, but the public health goals being 0.2 parts per billion, we are above that. So that's kind of a summary of the lead data we've collected. The best available technology that's out there for lead control is optimized corrosion control, where we do a pH control so that there is nothing corrosive that goes into the distribution system or ultimately onto the customer side. As you can see, that was started in 1999. And what we do is at every treatment facility, we do a pH adjustment, and at the finished water that leaves all the plants, the blender, desal, and TP2. And there is this parameter called calcium carbonate precipitation potential, which is an indicator, but that is controlled continuously at all production facilities. And we have daily reports of those, and we make sure that those remain above the target so that there is no potential for any corrosion happening either in the distribution or even beyond. So we are achieving optimal corrosion control, and we continue to meet the action level, which is, as you know, 15 parts per billion. We are below that for lead. So the recommendation is we will continue to do the corrosion control program. And that way we continue to meet the action level for lead. Therefore, the recommendation is no additional corrosion control treatment is needed at this time. In addition, we have also taken proactive steps to prevent further lead exposure. Through our water meter replacement program in '99, we had a school compound meter replacement program. And then since '99, all new construction, it's only lead-free meters that have been installed in all new residential construction. And of course, under the advanced meter infrastructure project, all the existing meters that are going to go with the remote readers and all the digital capabilities will all be lead-free. That's part of the AMI project. So those are some of the ways we are addressing or replacing anything that has lead out there. In addition, there is on our website, there's a lot of information and the public education programs, such as in the morning, if the water has been stagnant in the home system for over 6 hours, make sure you get a good flush. And given the drought, we have also been telling customers not to just throw it down the drain. It can be used for plants and, put it to some good use. So flushing the tap and then using cold water for cooking, drinking, or preparing baby formula, because lead, as we all know, if you run hot water through those pipes containing lead, there is a potential for leaching. So we've been doing a customer outreach also.
A question on the water meter replacement program.
Yes.
Under AMI, we're replacing all of the smaller meters for residential use with ultrasonic meters. As I recall, the board did not accept the staff recommendation that we replace the larger meters, but rather keep the existing larger meters and attach a meter reading device on them for AMI. Do we review the existing larger meters to determine if any of them might have lead in them? Because they've been put in over a long period of time.
Under Doug Chun, when he was here, he had a program with the meter shop, and they actually coded the large meters. So that was taken care of, I want to say, in the 2000s.
So it was not a replacement, but they coded and
That's how I
put a
understand it.
corrosion-resistant
Correct.
device on the lead in the larger meters.
Correct. And of course, now California does not allow any kind of or non-leaded material with the brass. So as we replace some of those are being removed too.
Do we have a running tally of where those meters are that do have lead?
I would have to go back. We would have to go back in records and look, but I'm pretty sure they should exist somewhere.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, and I'll just add, that was probably about 20 years ago that we did that program. And we have been replacing large meters just as part of a replacement program since then. But no matter how old the meter is or what the original components of construction are, there's no lead in contact with the water. So, part of the reason for the AMI project not replacing all of the larger meters is because we already have a meter replacement program for the larger meters. And it was simple enough just to attach the AMI components to the larger meter.
And on our meter replacement program, are we using ultrasonic or are we staying with the positive displacement meters? Did we change the type of meter?
I believe those are displacement meters.
So that it remained with the antiquated positive displacement meter? All right, thank you.
Welcome. Thank you, Ms. Pena.
I would note that the difference in read on that, and it may come into our water loss calculations, the larger meters as much as 8%. So water loss was non-revenue water when they first brought out that legislation. And by retaining the larger meters, which is a major portion of our water supply, we have built in about an 8% deficit for that portion. Thank you.
Thank you for those observations, Director Weed. Further, in terms of reducing any lead exposure due to any customer side issues, through a permit amendment that was issued on January 2017, and then followed by AB 746 and the upcoming US EPA lead and copper rule revisions, we have taken proactive steps in terms of providing sampling assistance to K through 12th grade schools who have submitted requests. And then under AB 746, we completed all sampling in 2018. Under the upcoming US EPA lead and copper rule revisions, there is provisions for sampling at schools once every 5 years. So these are all with regards to school sampling for lead. Additionally, like I mentioned, the lead service line inventory. So there are two aspects of this. One that comes from the main and goes all the way up to the meter, and then beyond the meter, which is the customer side. That's coming as part of the EPA lead and copper rule revision, lead service line inventory. But as part of SB 1398, lead service line inventory, we did develop an inventory of water service lines, and no lead service lines were discovered. And then we, in July, prior to July 2020, we further, as part of that, went out and used field investigation techniques to see if there are any lead service lines, and those that were not covered in the first survey, and we did not find any lead service lines. Now, the upcoming lead and copper rule revision from the EPA, which is going to be effective in October 2024, requires, in addition to the material inventory we completed, there is ongoing investigation of service line material from water meter to customer home, and that's being carried out currently in conjunction with the EMI project. So we have gone above and beyond the meter. On the customer side is something the lead and copper rule revisions also requires. As I indicated, so the lead is something that's not in our water supply, but as you saw, there are so many factors that are beyond our control in terms of what's there in internal plumbing, but nevertheless, the outreach combined with the assistance with sampling, combined with taking inventory of the materials, a phased approach, we are doing everything to minimize any potential lead exposure that could happen in those last final reaches to the home plumbing. The other one is bromate. Bromate, primarily, this is Like I mentioned, from the ozonation process, it's a byproduct. And the only plant where we use ozone is TP2, which is the surface water treatment plant. Ozone, as we know, is a disinfectant used for and also used for taste and odor control. But raw water, which comes from the delta, has varying levels of bromide. And bromide and ozonation essentially creates a byproduct, which is bromate. The public health goal is 0.1 parts per billion, and MCLG, of course, we would expect is 0. Basically, nothing should be there, is the goal. But bromate is a potential carcinogen, classified as group B2, so it's a potential carcinogen. The MCL for bromate is 10 parts per billion, and we are in full compliance with the MCL. The running annual average, like I mentioned, ranges from non-detected to 2.2 during the 3-year data set 2019, 20, and 21 we collected. And the bromate formation and the levels that I'll show in the next graph was associated with variation in the bromide levels, because when you have dry years and the delta quality varies, you do expect these spikes in the raw water bromide. And the ozonation basically creates a little bit different or a little bit elevated bromate, which you will see in the next graph.
May I ask how many slides you're going through? Director Gunther and I have already been through this presentation once.
Yes, there are only probably 6.
Sounds good.
Thank you. So as you can see, the quarterly compliance, the fourth quarter 2021 is just a little about 2.1, but the takeaway is those increases are attributed to the raw water bromide also increasing because of more drier years and the delta water quality changing. So, but again, the MCL of 10, we are well under that. This is just to show what is the range in the surface water so that we can kind of correlate this, the previous slide of the bromate formation. As you can see, the range in 2021 is a little bit close to 100, anywhere between 100 to about 470 or so. So the range of bromide, and then the average bromide levels. This is the raw water bromide that's been going up. So it's not very surprising to see the bromate levels go up a little bit more, not proportionally in the same amount. And the reason for that is I'm going to talk about what strategies we have implemented in a couple of slides. And that kind of shows how successful we have been in controlling the bromate levels. So the best available technology, BAT, for bromate control, both the Division of Drinking Water and EPA, they consider control of ozone treatment process to reduce production of bromate. Basically, you have to be able to control ozone from creating too much of a byproduct. And our strategies over a couple of years, several years back, we did 2 studies and came up with pH suppression via carbon dioxide injection before the raw water hits the ozone contactor. And we also do pre-chloramination before the raw water goes through the ozonation. And those 2 techniques have managed to keep our bromate levels well under control. As you can, and bromate was non-detect in 7 out of the 12 quarters. And like I said, toward the 2021 timeframe, when the raw water bromide increased, that's when you see those spikes in the bromate levels. But nevertheless, it's not a proportional increase, and the reason for that is pH suppression, pre-chloramination. Even though you have spikes in the raw water bromide levels, it does a pretty good job of controlling bromate formation. Low levels of bromate, as we saw in the previous graph, between 2020 and 2021, were due to elevated bromide in surface water. This is just to elaborate on the activities to reduce bromate, pH suppression. So we've been doing this since 2002, using carbon dioxide ahead of ozonation. And we've been able to maintain bromate below the MCL since then, just using that. But in addition to that, between 2007 and 2009, we did a pre-chloramination study ahead of the ozone contactor and found that adding that pre-treatment technology is even more effective. And as you can see, on it's estimated bromide reduction by 81%. That's why you see that bromide, even though it was going up, the bromide level formation again is going up, but not very much because of this pre-chloramination strategy also working together. So a combination of technique, and we implemented pre-chloramination at TP2 in 2011, and we've been keeping bromate under check, and it's worked out pretty good. So like I mentioned, one of the components of the report is what are the recommendations in addition to the data. So out of the hundreds of chemicals that have PHGs, only 2 exceeded the PHGs, but even there, the data is promising. I mean, looks good. We have control strategies. We have treatment technologies that we have implemented that are pretty robust and work very well under varying water quality, raw water quality. So our recommendations in the report is we continue the optimal corrosion control program. So maintain the pH adjustment. This is something which we have direct control over, because when the water leaves any of our facilities, we have a good grasp of the water quality, and we are able to do pH adjustment and keep that calcium carbonate precipitation potential also in check. In addition, we want to continue the lead education, updating our website with information related to lead sampling, and then all the publications. And for the bromate control at TP2, we will continue practicing pre-chloramination in addition to suppressing the pH as the key strategies. Any questions?
Well, let me see. First of all, are there any questions of the board before we open to the public hearing?
I have questions, but I'll defer to other board members first.
Pressure setting. Gunther, did you have a question?
More comment than question.
Please.
One of my favorite studies, never shied away from telling people about this. I understand where this comes from. Why? One only has to look at Flint, Michigan. In fact, coming on the news this afternoon there was something about Flint, Michigan and the people criminal charges. The problem is Flint, Michigan just chose not to ignore this rule or deliberately forget it. But we don't. We stick by it and we report exactly what we're supposed to report. And the water's great. The water's fantastic. But what we have telling us tonight is we have 2 items that have met a public health goal. We could educate till we're blue in the face, the public. But they see those 2 items, water's bad. It's not our fault. It's not the staff does a great job. This is a perception I have on, sorry, EPA. We're going down this same path with PFAS. Stand by. We have 2 things on this report. They're tiny. They don't even meet basic criteria, but they're there. And people will weaponize this report against us. There's a company out there, I hear it on the news, it drives me nuts every time I hear them advertise about taking those nasty chemicals, the chloramine and chlorine out of your water. They have pure water. And I'm just thinking, people believe this stuff. They don't understand that there is no lead in our water. Well, I can't say that, because who knows? It might be somewhere hiding somewhere. But no, our report says there is no lead in our water. The lead you're finding is coming from the house. But it's in our report. People don't read the fine print. And the ones that want to weaponize reports like this against the industry, want to use it to say the water's bad, and they want numbers. They want numbers. So there are agencies out there, there are districts out there, particularly out in the valley, that are having issues. But if you could say, There's 6 million people with bad water, but if you could take this report and say, well, geez, ACWD has bad water too. Look, it's right here in their report. They had 2 items where they didn't make the public health goal. Boom, up go your numbers. Telling you they're out there. So it's a big fight ahead of us. Shireen's got a lot of work to do. I just wanted to say our water is fantastic. So please, to anybody who might see this or read this, please read the fine print. If you really want to have some fun, go read about how they come up with these goals. Tell you, PFAS is coming. I think that's our next meeting. And this is nothing compared to what that's going to be. So I just wanted to say that because, you know, we're talking about having hit a couple of contaminant levels. Now, public health goals, minuscule numbers. The lead is taken from in a house that's supposed to be the point where you're going to have the most lead. So please, if you're listening, if you're watching, the water is fine. Yes, read the report, read it closely. Our staff is doing an incredible job. So that's what I got to say. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I guess I might as well jump in.
Yes.
Let's make it
Clerk Huang.
really clear.
Please put up the EPA defense.
No, I'm here as
I'm
a
just kidding, I'm
director
just
of
kidding you.
Alameda County Water District, and I will not speak for my daytime employers. So let's make this really clear. The water at ACWD is perfectly safe to drink. Our water meet and exceed all regulatory requirements. That's a factual statement. What we're talking about today is literally we trigger reporting requirements. This is a paperwork requirement, for lack of better words.
Director Huang, I am having a difficult time understanding you at your speaker, and
All right.
maybe my hearing is going. I apologize.
All right, here we go again. Our water is 100% safe to drink. We meet all regulatory requirements. What we are talking about tonight is reporting requirements. We hit the trigger to do a triennial report. That's what this whole presentation is all about. Now talk to the comments. So I agree with Director Gunther. Water is perfectly safe to drink and we meet all requirements. Let's repeat that again. But one thing I would like to say is thank you to staff. I am very appreciative of this really thorough presentation. I think what this presentation shows our customers is that regarding lead is not on our side of the service line, but we are still looking for ways to reach out to our customers to help them identify and figure out ways to make their water safer. In terms of bromine, it comes in our source water, but just based on the list, and I remember sitting in different committee meetings when we're talking about the pre-chlorination and the effect of it when we're doing all the studies. This district proactively look for ways to improve our customers' drinking water quality, regardless is it a MCO or not. So I think this presentation is very thorough and it actually does showcase our effort trying to improve our customers' water quality. So thank you very much. And no, I'm not yelling at you. I'm just trying to be louder.
Well, I'll make my comments now.
Please.
I don't have any questions on the presentation, but I concur with my fellow directors' comments. If anything, for me, this presentation inspires more confidence, not just as a director, but as a consumer of our water. I think we do a really excellent job. Not only is our water safe, but also very recently we came in the top 5 in the nation as some of the best tasting water in the country. And so I think this reiterates that our tap water is incredibly safe. We do an excellent job in our operations and also in our outreach to our customers and making sure that they're well aware that water is safe and where there are potential contaminants, we're doing our utmost to reach out to them and educate them about that. So I very much appreciate the work that went into this report and
Thank you.
to all of our operations. And just want to thank you for tonight's presentation.
All right, thank you. Commissioner Sethy?
Yes, our water is so good tasting, as Director Akbari pointed out, top 5 in the nation recently, that we're going to have to start bottling it and selling it for a good profit. I can just see it at the supermarkets now. So I would like to go back in a little bit of history here. I joined the board 12 years ago, and even before joining the board, I was encouraging the water district to send out the water quality report not only to our ratepayers, but to every address in our 3 communities. And working with our former general manager, Walt Wadlow, we set aside the funding to do that. And that was not only important for residential customers, but for all the strip malls and businesses out there where rental properties where only one person got the bill, but nobody else in that community, whether they were renters in an apartment complex or duplex or a strip mall, none of the other businesses could see what our data was. So I was very proud of that achievement to make sure that every addressee in our community received a water quality report. And I'm going to ask a question here because I'm trying to establish a metric for future workshops and meetings right now. Have we, as a district staff, received any feedback on our water quality report from residential customers?
You mean our annual water quality report?
Yes.
I believe we've had a little feedback here and there, some questions and things like that. I don't know if we're equipped to really characterize that level of feedback right now, but generally we don't have negative feedback as a rule.
I want to differentiate between those customers that ask questions of curiosity versus those that complain and say something is not right about our water based on the report.
Yeah, based upon the report, that's not something that I see or hear much of. We do have questions about, what does this mean? And where's my water come from and so forth, which are all outlined in that report and so forth. But I'm not aware of a significant number of folks complaining about the quality of the water based upon what's in the report.
Okay, I asked the question about residential. Have we had any complaints from business, commercial or industrial customers about our water? Trying to establish this in a public meeting here.
Yeah, I do not know of any complaints from any sector of our customers.
Okay, and most importantly, I would like to establish whether we've had any complaints from our institutional customers like Washington Hospital, Kaiser, Palo Alto Medical Care, any of the healthcare concerns in the community.
Yes, we have not received any complaints about the quality of the water.
Because I think they would be the ones who would look most closely at the statistics in terms of our water. And I know that the medical profession is very attentive to these kind of scientific pieces of data. So to date, we can establish that we have had minimal or close to zero concerns about our water, right?
Yeah, to confirm that, I'll ask our production manager, Mike Whitcomb, who actually tracks water quality complaints, to verify. They actually track these types of things.
I'm trying to establish this right now as facts in our community before we go into the workshops that are coming up, where we're going to be discussing in detail PFAS and PFOS.
Yes, sir. So we do receive general water quality complaints depending on whether it's possibly it's dirty water, possibly for aesthetic reasons. But I had interpreted this question as complaints from customers who have read our water quality report and have concerns about what's contained in it. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, I have not received any complaints to that effect. I will just check with Ms. Pena, who's been here longer than I
Okay,
am.
we can discuss this more when we have our workshop in a couple of weeks here. Director Gunther and I actually received a much more detailed presentation on PFAS, PFOS, and other types of anomalies in our water, especially when it came to our Maui Peralta well fields. So I want to ask a point of clarification based on what we heard in that presentation. We were told that there's no detection levels with our desalination water. Is that correct?
The treated water from desal, you mean?
Right.
Yeah.
So we mix our desal water with groundwater afterward to come up with the right softness, hardness level and taste. Is there detection levels after we've remixed groundwater into our desalinated water?
You mean after mixing the Cedar 2 water?
Right, the blended product water
The
from
blended
desal.
product water does not exceed the notification levels.
So it's under the NL levels.
Yes,
Okay.
yes, that is correct. Yes.
And our water that's produced that comes in from the Delta through our Mission San Jose water treatment plant, number 2. No detection levels or under NL.
Under
levels.
NLs, yes.
Okay, so our only concern is with what happens at the Peralta well field. And at that, if I'm correct, it's only above Hayward Fault. Is that correct? Or below Hayward Fault?
Director, just to backtrack a little bit to the desalination, the blended product water question, we do have one detection of one PFAS compound in that water, but it does not have a currently established notification level. And then to answer your question about the blending facility wells, we have detections in both well fields that exceed the notification level.
Both
Yes,
well
sir.
fields, okay. So when we talk about putting in these trains that we've been talking about, would they be at both Maui Peralta well fields or just on the upper Hayward Fault?
Peralta Tyson is above Hayward Fault and Maui is below Hayward Fault.
And maybe I can just clarify for the public and for the board, we will have a workshop on this next week.
Yeah.
PFAS is not included in the public health goals report or really the topic of the public hearing. And we have yet to hear from the public, but I just for the public's information, I wanted to make sure there's a distinction between the two. We've got a whole workshop. on
I'll get
PFAS.
to my point here real quick because it ties in with this report. Nevertheless, at least from my perspective. Director Huang, did you have some comments you want to make?
No, I was going to bring us back to this report because we're getting into an area that was making me a little bit uncomfortable. So, yeah, thank you.
Okay, I will cut straight to the chase here because the ACWD report on water quality relative to public health goals, I believe in the long run ties into all these issues of PFAS, PFOS, and other detected elements that are possible in our water that come out of the well fields around Peralta, Maui. And this all goes back to our agricultural days and industrial days as a community. I'm sure about it. But what Director Gunther and I heard in our meeting kind of alarms me, and I'm here to represent the community and make sure that we have healthy, good quality water all around. And it's in our mission statement to have high quality water delivered to the community, but not pristine, perfect water. And there's a difference. And if people have concerns about their absolute pristineness of their water, like they want Hetchechi water, then it's perfectly everyone's right to put in a water purification system at their home or facility, whatever it might be. But where it got to the point of ridiculousness, and I think Director Gunther agreed with me. We're being told that in 1 grain of a particle in an Olympic-sized swimming pool, that's 660,000 gallons of water. Let's multiply that by 20 so that we're up near 12 million gallons of 12 MGD that we're producing at the well fields. So you have a few particles of grain. Well, the average, or, you know, a human being might live to 100 years. That's 360 or 36,500 days. That means you have to, you essentially have to drink half a swimming pool of water just to get a fraction of a grain of sand in your system. And where I object as a board director and just as a simple consumer in my society is that we live with these things everywhere we go. You can walk into somebody's living room and you can gather more PFAS on your shoes than you can in a decade of drinking water from our water supply. I'm going to hammer on this and bring it up again in future meetings, but I'll cut it at that. But I think we're getting to the point of absurdity when we try to spend tens of millions of dollars to remove a grain of sand.
Okay, Director Sethy, PFAS were not part of the water quality standards for the report that's before us.
No, but it's leading
They
into
were-
it.
No, it'll be a separate report with a separate set of issues. But I will be addressing that in about 2 weeks. But for this report, I do have some questions and comments. Are you finished on your comments?
I only had one other comment, which is that in the future, I would appreciate it if we understood where we compare with our other Bay Area water agencies, so that we have the knowledge to inform our community where we stand compared with East Bay Mud, Zone 7, Valley Water. I think that's very helpful for just as us as directors in the community, you know. This is kind of abstract when you can't compare it with other data. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Questions I might, we have two issues of concern, lead and bromate. On lead, that is site specific and it's not in our general water supply. It's something that would be located generally to a specific customer or a certain area. So I encourage us to pursue the documentation of where we might have meters which have not been replaced but been coated, which is an accepted process for mitigating lead contamination or eliminating it. In Flint, Michigan, the lead contamination issue came to people were alerted by a pediatrician who had blood samples of his patients. Do we have any effort, even though it may not be part of the standard procedures, to have in communication with the health community in the area, should they find patients with a lead in their blood samples? And I would encourage us to look into that as a mechanism, because that is what triggered the Flint, Michigan crisis. Bromate. Over 20 years ago, Walt Wadlow was the water quality person, head of water at Santa Clara, the Valley Water District, now the Valley Water District. And a report came out that bromates were causing spontaneous abortions. Some of the activist groups suggested that women of childbearing age not take showers if they lived in Santa Clara County. And that was a major crisis and was subject of a major study. And it was determined they could not replicate the data that came out of, I think, the city of Santa Clara. But as they got into more detailed studies of the bromate, it was determined that there were 5 different versions of the bromate that were being identified. And at least one of those was considered to be suspect. So I would encourage us to look at our bromate analysis to see if there's even a more sophisticated approach we could use on the bromate evaluations based on what the Valley Water District's experience was 20 years ago. So those are my points. Thank you.
Thank you.
And let me make a comment here. Has the district secretary received any written comments?
No, I have not.
All right. The district will now accept public comments if anyone has any member of the public. We have one hand raised, that is Mr. Ken Nishimura. And thank you for, please address the board.
Thank you, President Weed. As a customer of the Alameda County Water District, and I drink your water most every day, I am highly confident that the water that the district supplies meets all public health goals and is safe to drink. So I echo the comments that the directors made, that I have very high confidence in the quality of the water, and that the water is not going to make me sick. I am a data-driven, scientifically driven person, and I watch what goes on in this industry, and the emerging contaminants of concern that we spent quite a lot of time discussing, which I won't go there at this meeting. As far as lead, I do believe that the consensus amongst the scientific community is, the goal is 0. And once again, I will reiterate that the water that is supplied by the district has no measurable amount of lead in it, and that the lead that is being sampled at the customer's tap is coming from the plumbing fixtures or the water conveyances at that customer's premises. And we talked a little bit about before, I believe about 2005, the use of lead as an alloying material in brass to make it easier to cast. That has subsequently been removed. I believe prior to 1988, lead was permitted in solder. And I believe that's another area where lead could be entering the water supply at a particular premises. Is that even if they have a copper pipe, if the plumber used lead, solder containing lead, depending on the quality of the joint, some lead-based solder could be exposed to the water and be adding lead into the water that's seen at the tap. So I guess I do have one question, is that these non-zero detects of lead are at the customer's tap. Are these occurring at single-family homes? Are they occurring at master metered residences, right? Because I believe there was discussion on large meters, which I would expect to be seen at master metered facilities. And then do they contribute lead? They were, the report said, or discussion said that they were coated. But it would be interesting to correlate a little bit, or have a little bit more information about the type of customer where we had non-zero detective lead. But I am highly confident that the district is, utilizing the industry best practices to control the corrosivity of the water, such that even if, that if there is lead in the plumbing fixtures, that the leach rate is minimized. As far as bromate,
As
yes.
we have only one, please go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say, as far as bromate, again, I believe that the levels are substantially below levels of concern. If one is very, very concerned about bromate, one needs to be very careful about the bread that they eat. Bromate is used as a dough conditioner in many breads at levels 10 to 100,000 times higher than the levels that we're discussing here. It is an unfortunate byproduct of this disinfection, right? The district has chosen to use ozone to eliminate another disinfectant byproduct, right? Trihalomethanes. It's sort of, you're stuck between a rock and a hard place. I believe ozone is state-of-the-art disinfection process. Unfortunately, it will oxidize bromide to bromate. And again, I'm confident that the district has taken best practices to control the pH of the water, which will reduce the rate of conversion of bromide to bromate. So, in summary, I echo the director's comments that and I'm highly confident in the safety of the water. As far as the overall quality of the water, I believe, I've been on record many times that the one thing that I wish the district would do is reduce the hardness of the water, right? That is not a primary contaminant goal or anything like that. It's an aesthetic goal. And the district has been slowly reducing the hardness in that's supplied. It used to be around 150, it's now down around 120. So I am appreciative of that. But lower the better. So I think that concludes my comments about the quality of the water. One last nitpick: the units that are used in this report, we mix ppb and micrograms per liter. I believe the official unit is micrograms per liter. The two are equivalent if the contaminant has a density of 1, which is typically not the case, especially with lead. So thank you very much.
Thank you. I believe there was a question or two in there, and if you please summarize the question and the answer, please.
I believe the question was samples that are collected for lead. They are sampled in the home, and whether or not they come from multifamilies or larger meters or single family residents, and those are from single family residents.
So we do not survey multifamily or a multi-meter. Master meter units are not
So
surveyed.
there's quite a bit of requirements for sampling, and a lot of it has to do also with the year the building is built, and then also whether or not retrofits were made within the building. And with multifamily units, it's not well known, and so that's one of the questions that a lot of the customers cannot answer.
That's interesting. So you feel that is a deficiency in our overall process and evaluations?
No, don't believe so. But I think most of the lead has been shown to come from smaller lines, and lead was not made for large meters or large services. So most of lead service lines were known to be less than 2 inches.
Okay. All right. Well,
It
Well, thank
wasn't
you.
made in the larger sizes.
thank you for the information.
I do have one
Okay.
quick follow-up question. So for the single family customers that had non-zero detects, has the district notified them and recommended that they take steps to perhaps replace old plumbing to reduce the potential for lead leaching into their water?
Yes. Yeah, we did reach out to those customers, and like I mentioned, those strategies they could adopt, and in terms of replacing the plumbing and flushing the water, we have done an outreach. Yes.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
All right. We have like to thank each of the speakers. So after going through this, is there anyone else who wishes to speak to the board and we have not acknowledged? They're not being so, then let us bring the public hearing to a close.
Just for the record, President Weed, there's no members of the public are present here in the room, so no speaker cards were submitted.
All right, thank you. And thank you, staff, for the presentation and all the work that you've done for this.
Thank you very much.
All right, now we then have on to the remainder of the agenda, which are reports.
Do we need
to make a motion?
Well, this was a report. Do we have to approve the report?
The idea is that the board receives the report, receives any public comments, any questions, and that if there's anything you want staff to respond to, this is a good opportunity. Any comments that the staff receives will be included in the final report, but the board needs to take no formal action on this item.
That's correct. Thank you.
And so I was going to ask, does the formal report come out next month or what? Is there a state obligation, a time deadline to get it out?
There is a timeline to get the report out. I just don't know what it is. I think Ms. Pena will share.
The draft report has already been published on our website. And so what we'll do is we'll make it into a final report.
And who is that reported to?
It's available on our website, and we are to let the Division of Drinking Water know that it's available.
For the state of California, do we have a federal reporting obligation?
No.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Then, if no further comments, then we have accepted we've received the report and proceed on to the next item on our agenda. So, thank you. We now have completed the action calendar. Going to reports, board committee reports. Is there anyone who has a comment on any of the 5 board committee reports we had last month?
None from me.
Okay, there being none, we can then move on to the operational report. And the first is operational quarterly projects review.
Yeah, and for the operational report, staff is available to answer any questions the board may have or respond to any questions the public may have. We did want to break out 6.2.6, the distribution system monthly hardness map, and be sure to share some updates on that with the board. But first, if there are any other questions on 6.2.1 through 6.2.5, be happy to address them.
There appear to be none, so let us move on to the 6.2.6 distribution system monthly hardness map.
Okay, and this is an item that's of very frequent interest, and so Mr. Ahrens will share some updates as to how we're planning to present this report moving forward.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Stevenson. This month's operations report include 2 versions of the distribution system hardness map. So on the screen on page 273 of your agenda package, which is at the second to last page, is the version of the hardness map that you are used to seeing. This is the traditional map that appears in the monthly agenda. On the following page, on page 274, is an updated version of the map that we plan to include in future agenda packages. The main difference you'll notice is that the rectangular hardness symbols have been replaced with squares. And also, at the suggestion of the Operations Water Quality Committee when they reviewed this item, we've also removed the K-point labels, making the map a little less cluttered and hopefully easier to read for the community and for the board. The reason for this change is that we've moved to a new software which allows the data to be pulled directly into the new map format. This has reduced the need for manual entry, saving significant staff time and also reducing the possibility of errors in the entry process. As also discussed with the Operations Water Quality Committee, on the new map, you'll notice that there's an example data point showing a high hardness and what that would look like. So on the second map, it's on the screen. In the top center, you'll see a large purple square. Just want to point out that this purple square that's labeled 185 is not a true hardness reading from our system. It is just an example. The actual hardness of that location was 125. But we did want to show what it looks like when the numbers go up. So you'll notice that the color changes and also the square gets bigger, not proportional, but bigger as the hardness numbers go up. So future agendas, we plan to use this map because it will save significant staff time in trying to create the map. And we also create this, outside of the agenda, monthly agenda, for weekly production discussions and to track hardness internally. So it saves significant staff time going to a new format. And we hope this is acceptable to the board. So with that, I just wanted to point out the change. Going forward, we plan to use the second map format, but we are open to any comments from the board.
Thank you. Are there any questions or comments on the format? Then we can go into the information in the report.
Here's a comment and a request. So I like the new format. I think it's great. I do wish you would have put in a legend in map number 2, because when I looked at it, I go, hey, the two's not the same. There's this giant purple blob, right? So just for the record, I guess we have to ask council, is there any way we could just put in a note saying that the purple square is for example only?
Yeah, I don't see a problem with doing that.
Okay, yeah, because I will tell you that it was driving me absolutely crazy.
Sorry about that. Yes, we'll try to clarify that.
Maybe
Thank you.
best as a footnote.
Yes.
I just want to thank the staff for listening to the comments of Director Gunther and I from an earlier water ops and water quality committee meeting on how to clean up and make things more presentable to the public. And just want to thank you for listening.
Yes, and thank you for your input.
Thanks, staff. I mean, it sounds like it's faster and easier for you, which is great. And yeah, I did notice, I think it's K51 being a little high this month.
You like to make it exciting.
Yeah, yeah,
Interesting.
just to keep us, see if we really look at the map. I
Exactly.
guess, or-
All right, thank you very much.
I only have one comment about the water getting a little too soft, and former director Rediker was very attentive to this because he was a chemist by background, master's degree from Stanford. And there's a certain point where the water gets so soft that I'm using more water to get the soap off.
Yes.
And so I've had that experience recently where we've had, in Warm Springs, the water just getting so soft that it actually takes me a few more minutes to shower and I feel like I'm wasting water. I like that little bit of hardness.
Okay, we're going to hold you to that.
Yeah, I'm not complaining.
All right, thank you. Is there other? There was an economic valuation, value to soft water in cooling towers. It reduces the maintenance requirements significantly. And it was one of the economic aspects that San Francisco PUC and Bosca frequently raises in the issue of, and in truth, softer the water, the less soap is actually required to maintain a washing process. So maybe it's a type of soap. And water can be, if it's too pure, actually leach important chemicals and minerals from pipes and be somewhat destructive. It can be in its own way more damaging. pH balance is another issue. So there's a whole series of aspects of water quality which can have economic impact. And it appears that we have, since we don't have major changes in the water in those components, it's been to our advantage. And the softer the water, the lower the economic impact on the community.
I happen to like Irish Spring Original, so it takes more water.
All right.
Hey, if I can just share this quickly, I think President Weed and I are the only two people in this room that actually remember when we had the world's largest water softening plant down at Maui Peralta. And the foundation is still there with a very nice plaque on the ground. It was 10 stories tall. You could see it from around the community. And as I was growing up as a kid, my responsibility, along with a lot of the young boys in our neighborhood, we were all trained the same way by our families. We were responsible for getting the rock salt from the supermarket in 50-pound bags and bringing it home, even if it was on our bicycle, and taking care of our water softening machines. And the first complainant in the household was usually the mom, who wasn't getting the proper type of water for washing clothes and other types of things. So that's the way we actually grew up in this community in the sixties, seventies, eighties, as I was growing up. And every supermarket had stacks of rock salt for people to take home. When you left the store, you usually left with a bag of rock salt to put in your water softener. And that just tells you how much the quality of our water has changed over decades in our community. And so I just wanted to share that little bit of memory here. The world's largest saltwater water softening plant. Now we're talking about some of the same things as we get back to Mount Peralta.
All right. Well, thank you. Is there any other issue or comment?
You're a water historian.
We do have one member of the public who's got his hand raised,
Oh,
Mr.
I'm sorry.
Nishimura.
Yes, Mr. Nishimura.
Yes, yeah, so thanks. I think I've already made comments regarding the change to the new map format. I do support it. I believe when it was first introduced at the Operations and Water Quality Committee, as I'll echo the comments that anything that saves staff time and makes the district more efficient, I think is an overall win for the customer. And I too was fooled by that 185, because it looked like there was a data transcription error of some sort. But no, having been explained, it all makes sense to me. I do want to chime in a little bit about the economic cost of hard water, right? I mean, there is an economic cost of hard water, and this is why I do periodically comment about trying to reduce the hardness of the water. It does, at some point, it will induce people to buy water softeners, and water softeners, actually waste a considerable amount of water. So, in a drought situation, it's not advantageous to induce people to go out and buy water softeners or install water softeners. In addition, depending on the kind of hardness, and this is maybe a question back to the water chemists, we don't have to answer it right now if we don't have the data, is what fraction of the hardness is temporary hardness versus permanent hardness? Because the difference basically between the two basically will get deposited on the inside of your hot water heater, right? And that will eventually shorten the life of a traditional tank water heater, slowly reducing its efficiency and eventually potentially leading to its failure. So, and plumbing fixtures also get gunked up, with high hardness. So there is a detrimental economic impact to having hard water. So if again, that's the comment is really directed towards having the district with an economically viable, sensible means to reduce the hardness of the water would be appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't think there was a question there, so unless there was, please correct me. Those were comments, not a question.
I agree with Mr. Nishimura's comments. I hope my comments were taken in the spirit that they were meant. A little bit of humor about showering.
Yeah, I mean, the only question that was in there is if the district can perhaps report what fraction of the hardness is temporary versus permanent.
If someone could explain that to me, I'd appreciate it. I'm not familiar with that distinction.
So basically, if you take water, well, yeah, I'll let somebody else answer.
Let us take it to staff at this point and see if there's a.
Yeah, I say I do not have an answer to that question at this time, but we can look into it. I'm looking to staff. I don't know, Chris, are you up on your chemistry or Mike?
Let's move on.
We have an answer to one question.
We will have to look into that. And come back
Okay.
with that answer.
Thank you. And you have Commissioner Nishimura's contact if you need to further discuss it. All right, thank you. Then there are no
so that the state could monitor where consumption was going and if conservation was being affected throughout the state. And at that time, the governor's direction seems to have been happy with seeing the tide turning, that consumption is going down, headed in the right direction. And so no further actions were declared. However, today there was a governor's release that I'd like to just give a brief update on. Today, Governor Newsom did release an aggressive new water supply strategy for California, citing historic drought conditions and a recent estimate that California is projected to lose approximately 10% of its current water supply portfolio to climate change by the year 2040. I want to emphasize for a moment, in all the press releases we've been seeing, the theme is hotter and drier future. So this was the first time we've heard this estimate. It sounds about right. We've certainly been asking for more official numbers in this area, so I'm happy to see the state actually putting a number out there. Anyway, the water plan that was released today is establishing goals for state level achievement by the years 2030 and 2040, and for a mix of priorities from infrastructure, further enhancements in conservation, as well as upgrades to the state's water system. Notably, the plan includes endorsements for the Delta Conveyance Project, as well as ocean desalination. To promote success, the plan outlines funding priorities, as well as efforts to streamline regulatory processes. Today's release outlines the targets and the basics of the implementation strategy from the state. Staff will be monitoring developments as more details emerge, but just a lot of emphasis on the state trying to make things move faster, as well as providing funding to hit these goals. Next slide, please. Oh, that is fine. As far as
Mr. Nizar,
sir,
if I may add, I think one of the important things we need to note about the governor's announcement today was that if we go into a 4th year of drought, he was enunciating on the fact that the state would impose mandatory water budgets on water agencies, urban water agencies, with penalties if we didn't comply.
more
I think
specific.
that is a very serious statement on behalf of the governor.
That's correct. So the proposal is to basically accelerate an interim efficiency standard within the framework of the existing Making Conservation a Way of Life. And as noted, a 4th year of drought will push that forward. The existing process will see that through, and a decision will be made by January of 2024. So that is definitely one of the more concerning provisions. There's other concerning provisions on reevaluation of water rights, including seniority. There's a number of things that are definitely of concern, and we are going to be watching them very, very closely.
On the report, which I think is an important element, is there other comments on that? Let me note that I would hope that we in Zone 7 could bring to the state's attention that 50,000 acre feet of additional storage is built, plumbed, and paid for in Del Valle Reservoir. And the mere cost of relocating a visitor center for the 3rd time at a cost of a couple of $1 million would be a major step toward drought proofing much of the San Francisco Bay Area.
That's noted. I will note that the report did include a provision to evaluate rehabilitation of existing reservoirs, but it referred really to more like seismically unsound reservoirs. So it doesn't look like our concept that we've been interested in would fit underneath that line, but it certainly demands the question, and we will be asking it.
Mr. Nizar, I don't mean to detract from your presentation, but I just want to add to what President Weed is saying, that we had a study underway. I think it was with Dan Ford, the consultant.
David Ford.
To do a complete study on the reoperation of Lake Del Valle. And we were on our way to doing that. Director Akbari, I'm sorry to inform you, but when you joined the board, you were the 3rd vote against completing that study. And so we never got it done. And I am pleading with the staff, I'm pleading with you as a director, reconsider. Let's get that study done.
I don't know. I'm sorry, I don't know what you're talking about, Director Sethy, and I would have
It's
been
it's
the
a
other
study
vote.
on the reoperation of Lake Del Val. And the reason I'm begging us to look at this seriously and near term is that the lease is up with the state of California between them and East Bay Regional Park District.
2024.
If we don't get this study done, we have no negotiating leverage with anybody, with DWR, with East Bay Regional Park District, or anybody. And so once again, I plead, please, let's get this study done. I know it's $1 million,
Yeah.
but 50,000 acre feet is well worth it for our future. And this board authorized me, after Director Akbari joined the board, to speak before the California Water Commission about the reoperation of modest size reservoirs like this.
Oh, there may well be the reports that were done at the time the dam was built. And since that initial study, we've had indications that we have access to those original reports, which Mr. Ford was replicating. So the issue was actually a broader vote of the board not to proceed when one of our staff members came down and explained the cost that we were incurring, $1 million in the total study. But that was going for a $100 million grant, which with reoperation of a reservoir under Prop 1 was 100% financed potentially by the grant, no contribution by the local districts, and would have created 50,000 acre feet of viable active storage that is already built and plumbed and would have been immediately available to us. It would easily address the drought conditions of the
I would really
area.
love to see this on the agenda. I would really love that. I have nothing against it being on the agenda. Quite honestly, I don't remember voting against, and I would have been the third vote. So I don't remember that vote. And I'm a little concerned it got brought up because I don't remember doing that. I've never taken a position where I opposed a study regarding Lake Del Val. Not that I can remember, and I would love to see the day I said that.
I apologize.
so
I apologize, Director.
It's not
Gunther,
on the
but,
agenda.
I'd
Love to see it brought up again.
Director Gunther, I'm sorry to correct you, but we had the 3 votes before we went into an election. And then afterward, we wanted to complete the study. It was $1 million on the agenda. I will pull it back up if you would like.
If we could find that, I would love to see it because I don't remember that vote.
Okay,
the topic.
All I'm
It's
asking
not
you-
on the agenda this
Uh,
evening.
Director Sethy,
Let's bring it back to
Okay.
the agenda for a full discussion.
But my name was brought up, and I think it's incredibly disingenuous to say that
No, it's
one
not.
director.
No, it's
We don't
not.
even know that. vote.
Okay, so actually,
let's curtail this.
if I might,
Let's curtail this. The
agenda,
the
and
issue,
we'll
the issue was, should we
To say that
proceed?
one director
Yeah.
single-handedly.
It converted from one set of board
There's
members to
3 other
another.
directors.
Director Sethy,
How
I
you said one-
think, let's have staff
Because I can't remember. the
reconstruct the history of what occurred. But as I recall, the vote was whether we proceeded with our Proposition 1 application for the,
That's different.
and that
Yeah,
was,
you had to get the study done in order to do
well,
that.
that was part of it. But the real issue before us was, did we proceed with a $1 million application, which included the study, to request the $100 million from Prop 1 money? And the board flipped at that point, for a variety of reasons. We chose not to proceed ahead, but it's unfortunate. It was one of the great opportunities and remains one of the
I think
scandals in the
we
history
have
of water.
enough
I think we
discussion on
really
the
need to bring
subject.
this back.
I think there's a request to have an agenda item to rediscuss this.
yeah, we actually have a study session coming up. We can bring an additional item back to the board to kind of step through these. We have been talking about related issues in committee, but we will definitely bring back the item to the full board. If you don't mind, I'd like to move on now. We actually have another
you.
item related to water supply and water resources. And before we go to item,
Well, we still have to finish the demand tracking item before us.
Oh, are we not complete with that?
No, we
There's
just
a
started.
couple
we
more
cut in,
slides.
Interrupted the
Okay.
presentation.
All
All
right,
right,
all right.
let's
thank
go
you.
to the
Let's continue.
2022 demand tracking.
Right. So the good news is that our customers have stepped up in a way as we expected and have been doing a great job of complying with our ordinance, and we are nicely hitting our target numbers. And if we were to step into August, we are continuing to stay right on our target for conservation reduction. So that's a very good sign. And I know that I believe this chart showed somewhat prominently as well in the governor's package as one indication of movement by agencies. Next slide, please.
If I can
Continue-
go back to that one briefly. It would be interesting to show, and as a side note, at what point of conservation do we trigger the next increase in stage rates? Because the stage rates are really based on the loss of revenue due to conservation.
I think just to note, the stage rates are based on percentage range. We are right on target for a 15%. I'd refer to the finance manager.
Yeah, so the stage rates would be set based on the conservation target we are trying to achieve, right? And we expect to achieve. So, you know, if there's like a change in behavior to where just normally customers are using different amounts of water, then that would be more of a base rate issue to be considered through a rates process.
I would
State-
disagree. I believe the district's blowing smoke on that issue. The real issue for stage rates is loss of revenue. We ran into that through the last drought. And so when we have conservation, our revenues plunge because we're leveraged down with the heavy load on the variable rates versus fixed. And that's what triggers the need for staged rates, is a loss of revenue.
Right, but what we wouldn't do though is, let's say our target is 15% conservation. We develop a stage rate based on 15%. The water resources team develops an ordinance with restrictions designed to achieve 15% conservation. If we then achieve 25% conservation because we're even more successful with our conservation efforts, we wouldn't then increase the stage rate based on that target, right? Because the stage rate would be based on our actual emergency that we've declared, calling for 15%.
Right. But I would also argue that the conservation is not based on our conservation programs, but rather on social media and the social impacts that people stop using water. It's not as a direct component either on rate-based or any other campaign we do. We're based on social media and public media of the region. And we're in better sort than much of the Bay Area, but we've had the same influence.
With
our
all due
conservation history.
respect, can I bring us back to talk
Yes.
about drought
So
and water
that was,
efficiency? This
I
is
took
not a forum to talk about rate structure.
Okay, so let us go back then. Thank you for the presentation on demand tracking, where it looks like conservation is kicking in.
I do think there's a nice tie-in though with the governor's announcement today, which is those said efficiency measures. Where we are, we will be in good shape to comply with those should they be triggered with the fourth drought
Thank you.
right here. As far as customer interest, the regular customer activity, as you can see, remains very high, a little bit down from June, but still extremely high compared to non-drought conditions. Next slide, please. Good number of outreach events. You can read the detail. I think most of them are just about upcoming events, but a few notable things. We did have a meeting with Meta, which is the new Facebook campus, as I understand. And they're interested in doing some programs at their new facility, as well as we're sending out letters that are going out this week or starting to arrive this week, about 2,800 letters to dedicated landscape accounts that would have the non-functional or often called ornamental turf that has been put under a ban during the drought. And also noteworthy in the governor's announcement today is the state setting up funding for conversion of said non-functional turf for drought tolerant landscaping. So another indication that that's a likely long-term measure. Next slide, please. Any questions about the ongoing drought management activities?
Thank you. Yes, Director Sethy.
I have a quick comment. I am on the Aqua Water Management Committee, where we have a subcommittee that is devoted to the water loss regulations that are being developed by the State Water Board, right? And so new regulations are coming forth soon. And at our last meeting last week, there was pretty much universal dissatisfaction with the new proposed regulations that are coming forward. I have been silent through most of the meetings, just listening and gathering information keep myself informed for our district. But I decided to speak up at the end of the last meeting, especially since we had members of the State Water Board present and staff that are, implementing the regulations. And I was pretty caustic in my remarks that the State Water Board is imposing regulations in the abstract. And I said, I speak as an elected member of an urban water district where you have to have boots on the ground and know what your community feels about trying to impose these kind of regulations. They want a snap results done within, maybe a 5-year period. And I said, these things take 5 decades to get done. You cannot suddenly start tearing up all your streets and you have no understanding as regulators what it takes to even do a couple of miles of pipeline renewal. Look, we're 2 years behind right on Driscoll Road right now. And you have to deal with all of your cities, the municipalities, all of the utilities, everything that's underground. You cannot create commotions in your community just to address a small fraction of water loss in the system. I said, if we're doing 45,000 acre feet of water a year, and we have 2,500 acre feet of water loss in the system, to us as board members, that's a cost of doing business. And we factor that in as we're trying to do long-term main renewal, address water leaks that are in the system, everything else like that. So I expressed to the board here, I sincerely believe this is just going way overboard in terms of the State Water Board imposing mandates on our district that simply don't make any sense. And I told them, I said, you have to live in our community. And if you realize the cost of what you're asking for in the near term, no one in our community would approve of it. They would throw all of us off the board. And so I finally stood up last week. I just had to speak my mind and say, enough is enough. I'll leave it at that.
Thank you.
Well, it's
do we have
worth
any other
noting
comment?
that the governor's announcement today does anticipate 500,000 acre feet per year of reduced water waste, which I assume is drawn, the details aren't there, but I assume is drawn from the legislation that's being rolled out.
Okay.
So a point is definitely noted.
Let me note also, follow, when the first presentation of this was made and presenting this concept, representatives of DWR and the State Water Resources Board said that they were addressing non-revenue water, and that's how they defined water loss.
Mhm.
That term non-revenue water seems to have dropped from the lexicon and the guidelines.
It's not even being included anymore.
So the non-revenue water issue can be addressed with the meters and the inaccuracy of the meters. In our case, we have highly accurate now ultrasonic meters going in as solid state meters to the residential. For the larger, there's about 8%. We can, I think, demonstrate that we have an 8% non-revenue water in the larger meters. That I would hope would meet the requirements for the state's water loss regulations if we're allowed to take that into account.
Our staff member Devin Becker is working on this. I think the board's quite familiar with him. I do know qualitatively from Devin's report that the value of the meter replacement that we're going through will go a very long way to get the district into comfortable compliance.
And
It's not done yet, so I'm wary to say that that is a fact, but that's the indication right now.
I will just add, we had like, I don't know, 65, 70 people on that water loss committee last week. And our general manager, Ed Stevenson, he knows Paul Helliker, GM of San Juan Water District. And after I spoke, he spoke up in my defense. And he said, what Director Sethy is saying is what no one wants to talk about. And everyone's too afraid to stand up to the water board. And thank God we have one person among us that is willing to stand up to the state regulators. And then all of the other general managers joined in. But everyone was silent up until the point I spoke. And then Paul Helliker said, let me put up a point of defense for Director Sethy. You can verify that.
Thank you. Okay, is there more to the report or is that complete?
Well, we did have one other update.
All right.
Ed, did you want to introduce this? or
Yeah,
should I just-
we before we move on to 6.4.3, we'll just squeeze in a quick GM report about the draft environmental impact report for Delta Conveyance, and I'll ask Thomas to cover that quickly.
Thank you. So, yes, we would like to make the board and the community aware that the draft environmental impact report for the Delta Conveyance project is now available for public review and comment through October 27th of 2022. The response of the EIR is to disclose the potential environmental impacts of the proposed project and its alternatives. It also identifies feasible mitigation measures to avoid, minimize, or otherwise offset potentially significant environmental impacts. Delta Conveyance project is critical to addressing climate change impacts and modernizing the state water project system, which provides about 40% of ACWD's water supply. A number of fact sheets, videos, and other resources about the Delta Conveyance project and the EIR are available online, and we encourage anyone interested in learning more to view those resources at deltaconveyanceproject.com or to reach out to ACWD with questions.
Thank you. Is there any other?
All right, now 6.4.3 would be a report by our Director of Finance and Administration, John Wonderlich.
Great, thank you, Mr. Stevenson. The Government Finance Officers Association established the Certificate of Achievement for Excellence in Financial Reporting to encourage and assist state and local governments to go beyond minimum requirements of generally accepted accounting principles when preparing their annual comprehensive financial reports, and to go beyond that and instead in their reports demonstrate the spirit of transparency and full disclosure. And what that means in practicality in our annual financial report is that instead of just having, the 4 or 5 pages of the financial statements and then, the 40 or 50 pages of required notes, we also have a comprehensive cover letter. We have a comprehensive management and discussion and analysis, and then also extensive financial and operating information in a statistical section, all of which is designed to give the reader a lot more information than just the numbers within the financial statements themselves. And so I'm pleased to report this evening that the district for the 23rd year in a row has been recognized through this reporting program. And it's really a testament to the work of our accounting team, as well as the support they receive from staff throughout the district each year in preparing the report. And so that's the report for this evening.
Thank you.
Excellent work.
That's great. And I run out of wall space for all these trophies.
Yeah, they've actually changed the structure. We no longer get a new plaque each year. Instead, we get a plaque every 10 years with a little kind of decal that we can put on it to show each year.
I hope you're still with us.
Yeah, we are filling it up in the conference room down on that end of the building.
Military awards, they gave oak and silver leaf clusters. Thank you. All right, thank you.
Yeah.
So,
Just got a couple quick updates
Please.
on some outreach and community events. We'll be at the Festival of India. I think your board received an email recently. That'll be Saturday and Sunday, August 20 and 21, from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. 39439 Paseo Padre. We have a booth there. It'll be booth number 171. So if you want to look us up, feel free to stop by both Saturday and Sunday.
no parade this year?
Well, the Newark days, there will
Oh,
be
I'm
a
saying the
parade.
Festival of India is not having it.
If they are, we're not in the parade, we're at a booth.
Right.
I can't. Yeah, but we will be at the parade during Newark days. That will be Saturday, September 17th. That's the parade will start around 9:45 or 10. ACWD will participate in that parade. There's a 9 a.m. staging time. So you're more than welcome to join us as we walk the parade route and or drive the parade route. We will be providing the board some additional details. We get a little bit closer with regard to staging areas and so forth. Also for Newark days, there's the information fair Sunday, September 18. That's noon to 4 at the Newark Community Center Park. And we'll have a table there. You're free to stop by. Also, as a quick reminder, we have 2 special board meetings planned for next Thursday, next week. So we have one that's a special board meeting. We've programmed a workshop on PFAS. There was a lot of discussion about PFAS this evening. And then we have another meeting that we're adding just now, and the board has received some inquiries as to your availability for a pre-meeting, a meeting just in advance of our special workshop starting at 3. Then that'll deal with one closed session topic. So if you haven't already responded with your availability, please do so. We are planning on having 2 meetings on Thursday, both 3 o'clock and 4 o'clock. And I think that completes our general manager's reports. Quite a mouthful this evening.
Okay, thank you. And let us then go to the final item before adjournment, which are director's comments, reports on meetings attended, and agenda item request. Director Sethy did have a report on a trip he took.
I would like to go last if I may.
Okay.
I just can't wait for his report. I am so jealous. Director Akbari, no reports.
I note that I have been asked to participate in an aqua PFAS subcommittee of the Water Quality Committee. I'd raised some issues with them on, alerted them to some articles on PFAS through Edgar Dimely, who is with the Met and chair of the AWWA Water Quality Committee. And then based on that was asked to join a committee of about 6 people, including Sarah Palmer from Zone 7. And hopefully Laura Heides can be brought in to observe.
You're going to become our PFAS expert pretty soon, next to Judy.
Well, actually, it's just a quick note. They have a study that talks about dark matter. The dark matter are the areas that they have no comprehension what it is, but they at least want to try and quantify it. So it's remarkable. We're into a strange world with this contaminant. To be one, I call it a black swan, to be followed by additional black swans of microplastics and pharmaceuticals. So it's coming down the pike with one thing after another that will fall. If you're upset now, you go totally batty as this stuff continues. Thank you.
I find it interesting that President Weed is friends with Mr. Dimely. When I was in college and Governor Brown was serving his first term in office as governor, and Mervyn Dimely, his father, was our lieutenant governor.
Actually, his uncle.
Oh, uncle.
Yes.
Oh, okay. So I got to know Mervyn Dimely pretty well back then. I've never met the nephew, but I hear a lot of good things about him in the water industry. And of course, Mervyn Dimely was the first African-American ever as our distinguished Lieutenant Governor. So I feel a little bit embarrassed tonight because I have 6 different reports and I'm going to try to make them quick. So first of all, the Delta Conveyance Finance Authority that I serve on, the meeting was canceled just an hour before the meeting last month. Because of all things, the meeting was not properly noticed. These things do actually happen. And so our meeting was moved forward to September. And you may have noticed in the press that the Department of Water Resources released its EIR with comments due back by October 27th. Raise your hands if you've read through all 3,000 pages. There will be 3 public meetings that are, I think we've all been noticed on. I hope you will sit on at least one of them. And I will give everybody a test before the end of October. Giving everybody notice.
Let me make a quick note that they already had the first letter requesting an extension of time for peer review that came in almost by
Yeah.
submittal, automatic submittal.
Not gonna happen. Not gonna happen. Second, we had our Los Vaqueros Reservoir JPA regular monthly meeting yesterday. Mr. Wunderlich was in the open part of that meeting. Most of it was devoted to a closed door session where we were completing our consideration for a new executive director for the JPA. And we unanimously settled on an individual, and the current interim administrator, Marguerite Patil from Contra Costa Water District, and our general counsel will negotiate hopefully an agreeable contract with this person. And I'm being very careful not to say he, she, or any name, because it was all in closed door session, but hopefully we will be able to announce a new executive director after approval at our September meeting. And I will just note that it was a unanimous vote of all 8 agencies. And for each agency, it was our number 1 choice, which was quite remarkable. So I think that this board will be very pleased once they hear, if accepted, who this individual is. Next, this past week, I put together the only submittal for a fall Region 5 conference event. And so we've been working on that during the summer with a small team. The Region 5 board, which I am not a member of, approved the itinerary, the proposal, and the budget this last week. And then it went to the Aqua Board of Directors, and it was approved there as well. They actually gave the final budget approval. So that will be held down in Monterey on a Thursday and Friday at the end of the first week in October. I hope everyone will find time to join. I put the emphasis on this conference on the water issues around Monterey Bay, and in particular, the agricultural concerns of the Salinas Valley. And so I'm hoping to still schedule some really good quality speakers. And the Aqua president, Aqua Board of Directors gave me permission to go ahead with a sideline opportunity after the conference is open. If anybody wants to attend on their own, I'm organizing a field trip to the Moss Landing Elkhorn Slough for a safari tour that's about 2 hours. It is better than going to Disneyland. Let me tell you, it's wonderful. And we may go out to dinner right there in Moss Landing in the harbor afterward.
What are the dates?
I believe it's the 6th and 7th. It's the Friday and Thursday and Friday, first week in October. And the invitations are going to go out on Monday of next week. And we already have a lot of people from the Central Valley want to come in over the hill because of the agricultural issues that are being discussed. And I'm hoping to have, John and I spent a very nice luncheon down in Selma with the mayor of Soledad. She's a woman and the first Latino to be elected in 100 years from her community, which is 85% Latino. Most of them are not registered voters, so it's been, the vote has been controlled by certain farm families in the area until now. And she's a very dynamic lady. And I may also have Ana Caballeros, who is our state senator to the south of Senator Wykowski, who's also really very intelligent when it comes to the Salinas Valley. She's the former mayor of Salinas. So that's 3 reports. Fourth one, I took a CSDA course on the new state of California seal of civic engagement. It was authorized by the legislature in 2017 and with an order to have the Department of Education come up with the certification guidelines for junior and senior high school students. And so it was implemented for the first time in September 2020. And the reason CSDA has put on this program was to help their member agencies, special districts, become more aware of this state seal of civic engagement for graduating junior and senior high school students, so that we can develop tie-ins with the school districts to give students an opportunity to come up with projects that they can work on simply by attending board meetings for a year, you know, during their junior or senior year. Working on a particular water issue that might be of concern to our agency, research project. And so I forwarded my certificate of completion this morning to Gina. But I have the websites that I can forward you the links to. And I'm really hopeful that not only our public relations staff, but maybe our water resources group can look at some opportunities here and look at the examples from what other agencies are doing. DSDRD was one of the first water agencies in the area that adopted doing things the first year it was implemented. And Dan McIntyre, the general manager, was one of the presenters on the program for the CSDA course. We all know him. So I'll forward helpful links to that, because this would be an exciting initiative to get young people involved. Some water districts are now even appointing a student trustee, non-voting, just like the school boards. We may want to take a look at that. Different things to get young people involved with actually participating in their government. That's 4, 3 more to go. So I forwarded to Mr. Stevens today. I don't know if anyone saw it here today, but in this week's Tri-City Voice, and I'm happy to see the Tri-City Voice here joining our meeting, there is a very good article on helping with water bills. And so I forwarded that article with all of these different resources that are available in South County that can supplement our Help on Tap program. And the resources that are available to help people out on their utility bills. And it turns out, after I communicated this to the water district, our water district, it turns out they're always one step ahead of me. And I suggested we post all these resources to our website as an addendum to Help on Tap, and they are already working on it. So I think that these things that were pointed out in the Tri-City Voice today are really interesting opportunities to help our customers out where, you know, they're suffering on paying for their utilities. Let's see here. I asked Mr. Ahrens to help me out with the fact that I've been seeing what look like PVC water pipes all over the community and the center medians going up all over the place. And I thought these were water pipes because they're large. They look like water pipes on the ends with the connectors. And thank you, Mr. Ahrens, for giving me the information on where all of this work is occurring. Maybe you can elaborate a little bit.
Sure. The specific location we looked at was on Fremont Boulevard, heading from Grimmer south. There's also work on Blake Clow and several areas throughout the cities. And it's Union Sanitation District as a major rehab project. So they're actually lining their existing concrete pipes, but to do that, they're bypassing the flows through these large, it's actually HDPE pipe, which is like a heavy plastic pipe. It's running above ground, usually in the center median or on the shoulder. So when you see those, it's typically USD. They're bypassing flows from their existing pipes so they can line those in place. And there's a schedule that's on their website, and also gave Director Sethy of that work taking place over the last few weeks and continuing for the next month or two.
I want to thank you for my curiosity question because I just couldn't figure out what was going on around the community. And, you know, it looks like Union Sanitary District is working as actively as ACWD on their main renewal program.
Yes, lots of work going on.
Yeah. Okay, I will finally get to the Region 1 event, Director Gunther. Okay. So you may ask, why does a director want to go all the way up to Eureka for a water conference?
I did.
Huh?
I wanted to.
So I brought here some slides that I want to go through, just a few of them.
And actually, just for the record, I could mention that we did post these slides. So if anybody is listening online and wants to have access to the slides, they're on our website in the agenda center for this meeting.
Yeah. I want to give a little bit of background here because I'm sure there are members of the community that might say, well, what value is there in a director going all the way up north, 300 miles away? I am, as you have heard me say in public presentations, like when we've had our fish ladder improvement project ceremonies, say that I believe that once these fish ladder improvements and fish screens and everything are completed, that we have to think about the next 30 years of ACWD and the restoration of our Alameda Creek watershed, not only through Niles Canyon, but into the upper watershed. And that's why I'm very saddened that we were never able to come together as a board to acquire the N3 Ranch, because it brought us all the way, it mostly controlled the entire Alameda Creek course all the way up to its water source. And I'm also interested in water districts that have the capability to manage large, vast watersheds. And I'm interested in how they do it and how they finance their operations and why it makes sense for water districts to own their watersheds. And I don't want to get belabor us into old arguments, but those are areas of interest to me. In particular, how do we restore the fishery habitat for the Alameda Creek, Niles Canyon area, and then into the upper watershed? And these are discussions I have had with the folks from Alameda Creek Alliance and other groups. And I think that if we think well beyond ourselves on this board, a board in 2040, 2050 is going to be dealing with these issues as we try to revive our fishery population. So what's going on up in the northwest of California has taken me, caught my interest. I went there 4 years ago to see the 40 miles of restoration and went down the river rafting through all the work on the lower 40 miles below Shasta Dam on the Trinity River. And I went to explore what they're doing on the Mad River. Comes from a Native American Indian name. And then the Eel River, which are going through major restoration efforts as well for both salmon. And President Weed and I have had the opportunity to visit quite a few of these fish restoration projects over the last few years at Puda Creek, at up in Brentwood, Yuba River, number of other places. And we are going to be attending the Water Education Foundation tour in November of the San Joaquin River restoration, which should be very interesting. These activities are going on all around California, and I'm trying to learn lessons that we can pull back into our own community as to how we partner with people, just like we did with the Alameda Creek Fisheries Work Group, and pull all of these disjointed and joined agencies together to fulfill a future mission in the restoration of the Alameda Creek watershed. So we had some very interesting presentations up at Eureka. This was hosted by the Humboldt Bay Municipal Water District and the Humboldt Bay Community Services District. And I thought, to illustrate things, a picture's worth 1,000 words. And I wanted to illustrate this first slide because it shows what has happened from the 1950s to the present in terms of the water use in Eureka. Humboldt Bay Municipal Water District had a proposition that there were, a funding proposition in the 1950s to purchase land up in their watershed and build a reservoir to feed Eureka. And over the years, they acquired 100 miles of watershed land on both sides of the Mad River. And they built a lake with a reservoir way up in the mountains. Now imagine if it's the same thing as delivering water from Berryessa Lake all the way down to South San Jose. Conceive of that. Or take a reservoir that's up at Davis and we're getting the water all the way down in Alameda County right here in our district. That's how much territory this water district acquired in the watershed. And they were servicing a very vibrant community, delivering up to 60 million gallons a day. And remember, this district was doing the same thing at one point, right? we have a capacity up to 90 MGD, 80, 90 MGD. So here you look at what happened here with water usage, and you see it precipitously fell in the 1980s and early 1990s. And now they're down to a flat line of 10 million gallons a day. Can anyone imagine what happened? What caused this to happen? Yeah, well, I'll give you two answers because I've studied this at great length, and you can go look up the history here. It's a very sad story of what was once the equivalent of Monterey Carmel for California, one of the great tourist attractions, California. And what we witnessed here was the destruction of the timber industry due to two things. One, Pacific Coast Lumber, which I think all of us remember, went public in 1973. And 10 years later, the corporate raiders came in from private equity. The gentleman is still alive today in his 80s down in Texas. And they Mitt Romney'd Pacific Coast Lumber and all the family-owned lumber companies in the Pacific Northwest in California. Why did they do this? Because these families had 100-year business plans that they revised every 5 years. They managed a sustainable harvesting of lumber every year. They had huge assets and all of them had zero debt. So if you remember what is the movie? Barbarians at the Gate? Barbarians at the Gate. They came in and they did hostile takeovers on the stock market 10 years after these companies went public because they knew they could borrow all the debt they wanted because these companies had no debt on their balance sheets, and they turned them into abusing the wilderness that these families had been managing environmentally soundly over 4 or 5 generations back to the gold rush days. And they destroyed a timber industry. And what followed was the Sierra Club and all the environmental organizations. They came in like what do you call the birds that come in and snatch up everything, you know, buzzards, vultures. They came in like vultures. And the second part of the story here is, and it's not a very good story, is about how the environmental industry led by the Sierra Club destroyed this entire economy. And how many of us have belonged to the Sierra Club and other environmental organizations? I know that when I first ran for this board, they endorsed me. I had been a 30-year member. After 4 years on the board, I couldn't get an endorsement again. The same thing happened to Director Akbari after 4 years. Why? Because we consistently vote against the things that the environmental community stands up for, even though we all think we're environmentalists. If we have one vote in favor of the Delta conveyance, because this is the antithesis of what the Sierra Club believes in, you give one bad answer and you don't get an endorsement anymore. Well, if you look closely at what happened to Humboldt Bay, which is the second largest bay in California, we took an entire tour on a boat of it on Thursday. San Diego is the third largest port in California. What coincided here are a lot of other factors where you saw the downfall of the economy. We were told that Humboldt Bay had 400 boats a year on average coming in. Ships, major ships. And as part of shipping timber and pulp and the pulp is used for making paper and other products. The fishing industry, which was a byproduct of what they were shipping, no longer became sustainable because that was only a small portion of what they put on a ship going back east. So today they have an average of 9 ships a year, down from 400. We're talking about a bay like San Francisco and San Diego Bay. And at the same time, all of the cruise ships that were going up and down the coast and stopping in the Carmel of Northern California stopped coming in too. Everything shifted up to Portland, Seattle, and Vancouver.
With all due respect, Director Sethy, I think we enjoy listening to your opinions, but can I ask for what's the nexus to the district?
I mentioned the nexus at the very beginning. So I wanted to showcase what's going on here. Can I go to the next slide, please? So with this, here's the entire watershed that they have under their control now, going from Ruth Reservoir that they built. You can see it's 75 miles from the dam. It's a total of about 100 miles of watershed that they have acquired the rights to, the land interest and everything. And we went into some great detail about watershed management and the revival of the fishery industry along the Mad River here. And so they went through quite a discussion on these restoration efforts that are now taking decades of time. They're making progress. In another instance of the Sierra Club shooting itself in its own foot, we had these major fires along the Klamath National Forest. And because they wouldn't allow the thinning of the forest there and the underbrush, we now had huge amounts of underbrush and timber going into the Klamath River, killing, they estimate somewhere around 100,000, 120,000 fish. Because we're not managing our resources up there properly. What we see today in Eureka is a devastated, absolutely devastated economy. And there are a lot of other factors I can go to maybe on a dinner table or something with the board that are contributing factors here. But this is the decimation of an entire economy by private equity and by the environmental groups. And there were some lessons I learned up here during this conference about the implementation of solar systems up there. And I have some references to provide to staff. One of the horror stories that we heard about up there was that PG&E has come in and ordered the dismantling of solar operations that Santa Rosa Water District has already spent money on, and other water districts, because they don't approve of their energy storage plans. And so the city of Santa Rosa is now having to take out all of its solar operations because they don't meet the requirements of PG&E. Can we go to another slide here? I think there was one more. Yes, so I'm going to come back to this one, but go forward one more. So one of the issues that we're dealing with on Alameda Creek is having a sufficient cold water flow downriver in the spring and fall fish runs. And because they have so much excess water available, they are now going through the permitting process, which is the orange area, for an in-stream dedication of water so that they will have dedicated water flows to help with the fish restoration. And once again, I think if we're looking out over the next few decades, we're going to have our issues with San Francisco PUC on proper water releases from Calaveras Reservoir. And you disagree?
Minimum flow requirements are negotiated in biological opinions. So for example, ACWD has required flow release requirements, and I believe as a condition for Calaveras, the seismic retrofit, I believe San Francisco also has a mandated release amount. Is that correct?
Yeah, San Francisco has
Right.
flow release requirements. I'm not sure if it's as a result of the seismic work, but there are release requirements.
Yeah, so each agency, we're already required, we have our allocated amount
Yeah.
already.
I
We
I-
have gone through the entire negotiation.
Yes,
And I would like to say staff did a really good job, by the way.
I agree with you, Director Wong. I'm aware of those agreements that we have in place. What we don't know is what's required in the future for proper spawning. Not only in the direct flow of Alameda Creek, but all of the adjacent creeks and everything that's running in there. And we also have to be concerned about not only what's in the canyon and the watershed, but the coolness of the water out to the bay. This is not an ACWD issue. It's a multi-agency thing to think about. But if you don't have the right temperatures, where we used to have a proper canopy of trees on the old Alameda Creek before it was realigned by Army Corps of Engineers, you have a different environmental condition for the fish that are flowing upstream. So anyway, these were all the things that I was learning up there. And if I go back one step to the previous slide, you see where it's showing Humboldt Bay here, and you see the Samoa Peninsula. In the afternoon of the last day, we went down the Samoa Peninsula to a very interesting project where they're trying to restore part of the economy of Eureka. Humboldt Bay still produces half of all the shellfish that is distributed on the West Coast. Oysters, clams, mussels, other variety of shellfish, abalone. And the fact is that they have a very productive fishing industry up there, but there's no ships to take the fish for export. And they're trying to revive this. So we went to go visit a very old paper mill, a pump mill that makes paper pulp for making paper. And it is over 100 years old, and they have an intake from the bay and an outflow also that's 1.5 miles into the bay. So they don't require new permitting by the Coastal Commission or other commissions. And a Swedish company has bought this property and is trying to build what they have done in other places in the world, including Maine, state of Maine here in the United States, to build a salmon, on-land salmon factory to produce over 1 million metric tons of salmon a year through essentially a clean room operation from one end to the other with fresh water and seawater for every stage of life of the salmon. And they do this in Europe and other parts of the world. And these are their two first ventures in the United States. The one in Maine is virtually complete and all approved. But the hope is that 1 million metric tons of fish is a lot of fish in a year. And this is all being done artificially on land in the right environments. And there's a lot of hope that this may be the first example of sustainable future life for the economy of Eureka. So I wanted to point out that first slide about just the water usage going from the 50, 60 MGD a day for so many decades, and then it's flatlined now down to 10 million MGD. But when you are there with the people, especially with our Native American tribes and the people who have grown up in the economy and have long memories, and you see the devastation, the city 15 blocks by 10 blocks is all boarded up. Even at the hotel I was at, they wouldn't let us out to walk the streets. You had to be limousine to a restaurant or somewhere in the community because it's so dangerous today. And you would never imagine a place as idyllic as Monterey Carmel is now a virtual ghost town. And it is really sad, in my opinion, that much of Northern California is getting ignored by our state politicians. And it's as though nobody cares anymore about the folks that live in the northern part of the state. And so you find it very understandable when you see signs all over the place, vote for the state of Jefferson, because these people feel disinherited. And we don't hear people in our own communities around the Bay Area saying or crying out for what is going on in the economy up there, as we do for folks in the Central Valley. But this is a portion of our state heritage that has just gone to waste, and now they're trying to come up from the depths here. And I'm sorry if I'm spending a little bit too much time on this, but I did really want to share what was going on from this excursion up there for the Region 1 event. And there was so much more that I learned, and I hope to share it with other people along the way in our, other events where we can share these kind of stories. But as far as the lessons I learned that are relevant to this district, I think there were many, especially when it comes to the restoration of what I see in the future of Niles Canyon and the Alameda Creek watershed. And second, how well a water district that is the fraction of the size we are is managing 100 miles of watershed in the in the hundreds of thousands of acres. And I had the same experience when I went up to Nevada Irrigation District in Grass Valley. And imagine this, they're managing 250,000 acres of watershed all the way from Grass Valley to the California-Nevada border. It's really hard to believe, but they do it very well. And so I'll leave it at that.
All right, thank
And
you.
I appreciate everyone's patience of time here because
Okay.
I feel very passionate about what's going on up there.
Okay, thank you. Are there other comments from members of the board before we call for adjournment? If that's the end of the meeting, then we are adjourned until the meeting in next month.
Next week.
Next week, oh yeah, I'm sorry, next week has special meetings.